I had a very interesting start to life. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and came here for emergency open heart surgery when I was 7 weeks old during Hurricane Carla. And surgeon was a gentleman named Denton Cooley. He became world renowned for doing open heart surgery and practiced in the Houston Medical Center, which is an incredible place. I didn't used to talk about it very much, but he passed away at 95, which has been several years ago now, and I credit him with a lot.
From surviving emergency open heart surgery to taking on City Hall in one of Houston's most notorious real estate battles, Kevin Kirton has navigated life with curiosity and determination. As the founder of Buckhead Investment Partners, he's built a career developing multifamily properties throughout Houston. Beyond real estate, Kevin's inventive spirit has led him to create award-winning furniture designs, develop cooking devices, and explore various side ventures. His story reflects a balance of analytical thinking and creative problem solving that drives his entrepreneurial pursuits.
I feel like I wasn't always so focused on the goal. In other words, I don't think I wanted to be the biggest real estate developer ever. I'm not, and I never will be, and that's okay. I want to be good at whatever I choose to do. That's ambitious as much as it is just finding something you like and being willing to work at it.
When you think about all the things you've done, what are you most proud of? Kevin, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Nice to be on the show.
Yeah, nice to have you. This is your second time in an RV park, you said, or you came here a while ago?
I'm going to say it's been no more than 5 times, and I would have to go way back to figure out when, but I haven't been in many, and it's been a long time since the last time I was in an RV park.
Yes. Yeah. It's not bad. I think is it better than you thought?
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Like I said, I have a colleague who has done some development of RV parks recently, and so it's been something I've been wanting to kind of take a look at, and so this was a good opportunity to drive down Highway 6
and check it out. Yeah, we were doing some just quick calculations and thinking, these must cave. You buy them at the right price. I mean, seems like a pretty good investment. Low maintenance, easy to maintain. If you have people that are parked here for a while, they have 3 people working at this property, and there's probably at least 100 plus RVs. So.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, I'm sure that the return metrics factor in an occupancy percentage. That if you get over that threshold, you're probably doing great.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I think what I'd like to start with, I'm of the opinion that if the experiences you have kind of in your early years from, whether you call it 0 to 6 or 1 to 6 and 6 to 12, have a pretty significant impact on who you are, as an adult, right? You talk about the early years and the early experiences. If you were to kind of sum up some of the early experiences in your upbringing, how would you describe it in your own words?
I think I had a really nice childhood. My parents were great. They're both deceased now. I'm a little bit older than you are, but I had a very interesting start to life. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and came here for emergency open heart surgery when I was 7 weeks old, which at the time was basically unheard of. 1961 during Hurricane Carla, and surgeon was a gentleman named Denton Cooley, and he was world renowned. He became world renowned for doing open heart surgery and practiced in the Houston Medical Center, which is an incredible place. And I didn't used to talk about it very much, but he passed away at 95, which has been several years ago now, and I credit him with a lot. So bring it up sometimes. So yeah.
Wow, at 7 weeks old.
I haven't verified this, but I'm sure I was probably one of the youngest patients to ever have open heart surgery at that time, because it was brand new, really, basically. And the whole story would take a whole podcast to tell, but it was, there was a hurricane, emergency power at the hospital. Cooley had to fly from Scotland. He was at the conference in Scotland, landed in New Orleans, drove back, performed the surgery. Just crazy.
What happened?
I was born with a congenital defect. I had a congenital aortic stenosis was the diagnosis. It meant I had an aorta valve that was bicuspid instead of tricuspid, so my heart wasn't able to pump blood the way it needed to apply my body. And I was okay when I was hooked up to my mom, but when I came out, I needed to have something done, or else I wouldn't have survived.
And how long were you guys in Tulsa for?
A couple times. First time until about 5. Moved to Houston. Moved to back to Tulsa. Did a brief stint in Topeka, Kansas, and then back to Houston after that.
Why'd you guys move around so much?
Dad started out in working for Phillips Petroleum, just like everybody else in Oklahoma, pretty much, I think. And before I was born, was in World War II. And then when I was born, he was in the mortgage banking business and actually ran the Tulsa FHA office briefly. Came to Houston for a private opportunity. Well, actually, I guess before he came to Houston for a private opportunity, he went to Topeka, Kansas to run the FHA office in Topeka, Kansas, and then came to Houston for a private opportunity, and basically stayed after that.
Mm-hmm. And what about your mom? What did she do?
She was a housewife. She took care of the family, and I mean, she worked outside of the house doing kind of clerical type work periodically, but for the most part, her career was just raising the family. Very traditional kind of style. And they were both, Depression era. My dad was a month shy of his 99th birthday when he passed away in 2020, and so he was born in 1921.
Wow.
And lived a good long life, but had a lot of his upbringing was through challenging times with the Great Depression, and so that changed the way that they were. But they were very traditional. Did
he talk about his upbringing a lot with you?
Did you
hear stories?
A fair amount. Yeah, it's pretty good stories. Yeah.
What were some of the stories that?
Well, he grew up on a farm in a small town in Oklahoma. His parents come there during the Oklahoma land rush, basically, and from Georgia, and they lived in a little town, Amber, Oklahoma. It's kind of on the western side of Oklahoma, not far from Norman, where University of Oklahoma is, or Oklahoma City. And they farmed, and his dad was a rural mail carrier, and he went from watching his dad deliver mail sometimes in a horse-drawn carriage to the era of planes and rockets and things that we call phones that are really handheld computers and all that kind of stuff. So he had a pretty amazing stretch there. And Mom, too. She died 10 years earlier than he did. But, yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a sister and a brother.
So when you think about your upbringing, it sounds like your dad was in real estate. And that do you think that had a big influence in you kind of taking on a career in real estate? Yeah, there were two things that were really kind of seminal in that regard. One was that aspect, and then the other was I worked here in Houston in high school for a family pseudo-relative gentleman who was a civil engineer who had come over from England, gotten a civil engineering degree at University of Houston, and practiced in Houston for his whole life, and was very successful. And Houston was a good place to be involved in real estate related pursuits. And so civil engineering, you develop real estate, you go hire a civil engineer, make sure you can drain the site and you can do the things you need to do to make it function for whatever use you want to use it. So you engage multiple consultants or engineers and designers to help put together any kind of real estate development. So working for him was interesting, and it was during the late 70s when was a huge boom time in Houston, and we were literally working on the surveying crew in summers, working sometimes 70 hours a week, because we'd work 7 days a week, 10 hours, just to keep up with all the demand for what was going on. I love being out, seeing these developments start out as raw dirt and then go from there to subdivisions. We did a lot of single family subdivisions. Don't think we ever did an RV park, but I'm sure we
we might have done a boundary survey one time on an RV park. We did boundary surveys on cemeteries and buildings and, all kinds of variety of real estate, raw land, just a lot of things. So very interesting.
And this was your first job?
Was one of my early jobs. I did that, and I did some kind of construction related work when my dad was flipping houses for a while, and so I would help with the demo and rebuilding of the houses as a low cost labor for the family, basically.
You did work a lot growing up in your teens?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. I think Dad, that was one of the things that he instilled in me was just kind of the work ethic.
Yeah, and do you think you got it from him more through direct instruction of him wanting to, put you, like, ask get you to work, or was it just
labor? No.
Forced labor, or was it more like observation?
It was demonstrated.
It was demonstrated.
Yeah. I mean, as an example, when I was a teenager, he would. They didn't really, I had a curfew, but I could go out, and as I got older, it became less and less of a thing where they would concern themselves with that so much. But if I wasn't up doing something productive by 8 a.m. on the weekends, Dad would have a project right outside my door that he would be working on something that would just, in other words, we didn't sleep in around the house, and it wasn't really, he wasn't ugly about it. That was just part of the ethos of the house.
Wow. So that was just the part, and your siblings as well were up and.
Yeah, well, they were older than me, so there was a good amount of time when I was actually of the age to do some of the work I'm talking about, they were already out of the house. So my brother was 10 years older than me, and my sister 15. So,
do they feel more like parents at that point?
A little bit. I mean, I didn't know my sister that well as a child because she was gone. She was off to college by the time I can remember a lot of stuff, and then got to know her more later in life. And my brother was around, but he was, most of what I remember of him was in his teens, and he would, bring the cool friends over, and they would rough me up, and I loved it. So,
they would, because you were.
I can remember being thrown down in the front yard one time by one of his friends, and he faked stomping on my chest because I was bugging him probably or something.
You remember that?
And I thought it was awesome. Yeah.
Really? Why did you think it was awesome? Just
because he was paying attention to me. I was this little bratty kid that, was hanging out with the big kids. So he was all joking. I mean, it wasn't anything mean.
Yeah. What are some of your other early memories that you have?
I don't know. It's it'll all kind of circle back around to some of that. I just told you. So, yeah.
When you think about, it sounds like from your dad, you learned a lot of work ethic, right? That's really what he instilled. What would you say you took away from your mom?
I would say, excuse me for a minute. A lot of the same thing. She worked hard to keep the house running, and I learned some good cooking skills from her too, because she never really thought of her as a chef, but she made great food, and just sort of by osmosis, I learned some of that, and so I actually like to cook a lot, and probably partly as a result of that. So,
yeah.
And she was one of the kindest, fairest people that I, to this day, know. So, yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So when you think about school,
I feel like I'm having a therapy session.
No. When I talked to Steven, our mutual friend, he mentioned that you're also you love history and you love intellectual kind of pursuits. Would you consider yourself a pretty academic?
I am pretty nerdy. I think I would get consensus from most people who know me, and including my family, I think they think of me as kind of a hipster nerd sort of type.
A hipster nerd?
Well, you know, I like to learn about things that are kind of interesting. I like to try and stay relevant with everything that's going on. So I think I mentioned to you, I've got, you know, some interest in some tech stuff that I've been working on, and part of the reason why I wanted to meet you and learn a little bit about you too, and find out more about Zuma. And the reason I know Steve is because of that. And so, you know, I go all different directions. I listen to a lot of science podcasts just because I find it pretty interesting. I like math. I, you know, was pretty good at math in school coming up, and I think I still list that as one of my favorite subjects. So, you know, that's a little bit odd in some regards, maybe. I don't know.
Really? Why?
Well, I don't know. I think some people just that don't understand how cool math is, you know, think that's nerdy or whatever, or weird, or you know, who knows what. But I just like the fact that, you know, there's only certain outcomes to using numbers, and if you know how to manipulate them, then you're going to get the outcome.
Yeah, math was one of my favorite subjects growing up. As a kid, we used to have in elementary school, there was these tests, and they were called like 60-second tests or something, where you'd have this sheet of paper, like a sheet of, there would be like 40 times table questions, and you'd have 60 seconds. And I remember just loving that, because the teacher would say, go, and then everybody would like do it. And then as soon as you finish, you like look up to see who else is finished. And there's always this kid, Albert, who was always ahead. I was always second, but he would always beat me.
Right.
And I remember every, wow, this is giving me flashbacks. Every like level was a different color paper. So it was like yellow and green and purple. And I remember me and him were always on like the level, the highest level.
Right.
And I even remember as a kid, before bed, I would just do like I loved mental math. I just found it very stimulating. So I would do like the calculations, and I'd test myself with the calculator. And then when it started getting to like calculus and all of that stuff, then I was like, okay, this is too abstract for me. Right. And it became way too hard. Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed math. I think math just makes sense, right? It's logical and rational, and it just makes sense in my mind. Yeah. Yeah. No, I kind of hit a point in college where I maxed out on my math skills, but I took a lot of calculus, differential equations, and P-Chem, physical chemistry, which is really just math. But I never owned those courses really, and in other words, the math was challenging for me, and I wish I'd been even better at it, maybe. But I enjoyed the challenge of it. And then what I do like is finance math, and that math is easier than engineering math, I'll say. And so I kind of hit my stride with that, and that's kind of why I ended up with an economics finance degree. Okay, and that probably engineering. But, that math lends itself really well for, I imagine, real estate deals and purchasing and all that. I do geek out on spreadsheets. I have another guy who's a partner on deals with me that had a mechanical engineering degree. He's a Venezuelan American now. He's a U.S. citizen, but he came from Venezuela originally, and he and I love to get somebody's spreadsheet model of an apartment deal and just pick it apart and work it over and see what we like about it, and then build models of what we do for development, which is everything for me starts with putting a set of numbers together and validating the assumptions, and then trying to go out and raise capital to do the deal. So growing up, would you say that like you were a particularly ambitious person? Like, did you want to like build a real, maybe not real estate firm, but did you want to build something big? Would you consider yourself ambitious? Whether ambitious or just willing to work hard, I feel like I wasn't always so focused on the goal, or a certain
place as just going out and applying myself in something that I enjoyed doing. In other words, I don't think I wanted to be the biggest real estate developer ever, and I'm not, and I never will be, and that's okay. I want to be good at whatever I choose to do, and I like to really kind of get into some of it and become very proficient at whatever it is I'm doing. So, I don't know if that's ambitious as much as it is just finding something you like and being willing to work at it. So that's kind of.
Would you say you're a perfectionist in any way?
No, I have a wife for that, and she's very good at it. Now she's not completely that way, but we joke about it. That there's a saying that perfection is the enemy of good, or perfection is the enemy of finishing, or whatever. And I'm completely that way. I will get it done if I have to slap it together at the final moment to make it work. I mean, it needs to be right, but it doesn't have to be like, this will never be good enough. It'll be okay. And so I've worked with some people that are more at the other end, and so we can work together sometimes because it helps me and it helps them.
You mentioned the first job. This was what we talked about earlier. That was your first full-time job, or was it part-time?
The surveying and working for the civil engineer?
Yeah.
That was probably my first kind of real job, because it was high school, summers, and then even sometimes after school, during the school year, going into the office and doing work as opposed to going out in the field. But, yeah.
And then what happened next?
So next, I went to college, and
You went to Rice?
No, I went to Washington University in St. Louis, which has some similarities to Rice. It's an inner city school across the street from a major park. Kind of funny how I actually met with a gentleman of Indian descent who turns out I didn't even know before. This is right before this meeting. I was out here meeting him, and he got an architecture degree from Washington University, which I was completely unaware of until we were there talking, kind of learning about each other. And I mentioned something about that, and he goes, "Oh, well, then we went to the same school." Oh, okay, interesting. So
Not at the same time.
he got there a year after I graduated. He got there in '86. Told an incredible story about showing up with only one bag, because one of his bags bag with all his clothes didn't make it. He came over from India, was there on Labor Day, was supposed to go to the International House to get settled in, and got there. And I guess his flight didn't, this was back in the days when you didn't have cell phones. You didn't know what time your flight was. Nobody knew, whatever. He shows up at the door of the International House at 7 p.m. on Labor Day weekend. Nobody there. Doesn't know what to do. Doesn't have his bag of clothes. Had a bag full of food that his mom made him bring that he didn't really want. He said, and ended up finding somebody in a parking lot that was also a student there, and they, took him to a dorm, and an RA, grilled him because they weren't sure. They were being cautious. Anyway, ended up sleeping on a bare mattress for the night, and then started his journey after that at school. I thought it was a pretty incredible story to learn about this guy. Yeah,
that's like the classic. If you talk to any Indian older person, they always have I came to this country with $5 in my pocket. And it's like you substitute some number, but it's always less than $100.
That's part of the story. He had some traveler's checks and $20 in cash, and it took $8 to get from the airport to the front door of the International House. So he lost
40% of his net worth was gone.
He had $12 and no place to stay, and didn't even know where he was hardly.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. What was your college experience like?
It was pretty interesting. I took a semester off, moved to Colorado, and probably good that snowboarding wasn't really a thing then, because I may have never gone off to college. I think my dad was worried about that when I left to do that. But anyway, I started.
You took a semester off and went to Colorado to snowboard.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't actually. I went to ski and to just kind of try it out and see what it was like. I loved Colorado, and so I did that. And the deal was I wanted to take a year. Dad was worried I'd never come back. And what I was saying is that at the time, snowboarding wasn't really a thing. It may have been invented, but I wasn't aware of it. If it was, I might have taken to it, because later on I started snowboarding and enjoyed it so much that I might have just said, to heck with it, I'll just snowboard. But I didn't do that. I ended up going to school. Had a great experience. I mean, I met people from all over the world, but a lot from like the East Coast of the United States that came to school where at WashU, and have some of my best friends to this day are still those people that I met at that time, and we stay connected. We ski together sometimes.
You're still friends with them?
Yeah. Very good friends. And they're just interesting people from all different, areas and doing different things, but mostly very successful folks, but just, interesting personalities and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I find it, I was having a conversation with a couple people a couple days ago. It's actually fairly uncommon to be friends with, I feel like, people from your college days, and depending on how, as every decade goes by, what I've seen is that you tend to stay in touch with people that you share some common similarity with, right? If because everybody's growing, right? So every decade that goes by, you're morphing into some other person.
Yep.
And if those two people don't overlap with some similarities, it's hard to stay in touch, because what are you staying in touch about?
Right.
What similarities are you, what do you guys?
Most of these guys are fraternity brothers. And I'll say this too, my fraternity experience there was, I think, very unique, and it was really good. It was good for me. And I know some of this because I've seen other fraternities. I have a son who was in a fraternity. His experience was not at all the same as mine. We, by modern definitions, would have been involved in some things considered hazing, but it wasn't a forced thing, and it was the way that the whole experience was orchestrated was really incredible. It was almost like the actives put on a play for us to participate in during the whole pledgeship, and they were willing to do everything and more that we were called upon to do, and so you never felt like you were less than, and that's not the experience of a lot of fraternities. But because of that, these guys that I know, we just really bonded and have had, the ability. I mean, I could right now show up on any one of these guys' doorsteps, and they'd take me. Take care of me.
Wow.
Whatever,
That's awesome.
Yeah. Pretty unique in that regard. And it's a mutual deal. I mean, the same thing would happen if they showed up on my doorstep, and maybe one or two of them have, I don't know. But it was good. And, the environment was conducive to a small school with, a fairly close-knit but like-minded community in terms of, just smart people that were there for education and broadening their experiences and horizons and everything. So,
what fraternity was it?
Beta Theta Pi.
Okay.
But I don't think it has anything to do with, I've been to other Beta chapters, never really got involved on a national level like they like you to do. I think my experience was as unique to that particular location and set of folks as just about anything I could have had. So.
After graduating, what's the next step?
Interviewed a few places, had a couple of job opportunities with banks in Chicago, and my dad was starting a mortgage banking company in San Antonio, Texas at the time. I've always liked kind of startup entrepreneurial endeavors too. I guess I should go back to that. Yeah, even back then. And so I did some of really my first job, now that I'm digging into this, and again, this seems like therapy almost, but I had my own little lawn mowing business on the block we lived in Houston after we'd moved there for the second time, I think. And I was old enough to go mow a lawn by myself, so I would mow our lawn, and then I said, Dad, can I take our lawnmower and go, pitch my business to some other people? And sure enough, I was mowing, 4 or 5 lawns up and down the block once a week and making pretty decent money from it. So, that was my sort of first little dipping my toe into running a business, and the equipment was basically given to me to use. I didn't have to pay for that. I paid for the gas, but I didn't have to buy a lawnmower. Dad let me have the use of the lawnmower. But beyond that, it was, my sweat labor that went into doing it. And so I enjoyed that. Beyond that, I've tried several different kind of startup ideas. And then each apartment deal we do, it's a ground up development, that's a startup. I mean, we go out, we find a piece of dirt, we decide that it's the right location, we put together the plan, we raise the capital, we go execute on the development, and if we're right, people show up and rent units when it's all done. And so far we've had challenges, but not completely missed the boat on anything. We've always been able to successfully lease up and operate properties. So so that's the way I kind of look at it. And then I've got several different side hustles that I kind of like to dabble into.
What are some of the side hustles?
I have a tech idea I'm working on. I'm not going to really drill down on that. I have a pretty interesting oddball kind of cooking device that I am patent pending on, and have the name trademarked. That I still need to figure out how to actually make it in a product to go on a shelf. But I have that. I have a furniture line, I'll call it. I'm laughing because it's not a typical deal, but I basically, some of these meetings I sit in are very boring when we're talking about just, what color of landscaping to put out on the property when the spring comes or whatever. Anyway, sometimes it's boring, so I'll doodle. I was doodling, and I started ideating on a thought of how to take a sheet of plywood and make something out of it that has basically no waste. And so I came up with a design for a shelf that you can cut out, and the only waste is the kerf of the saw and the little notches where the shelves slide into the thing. And so I actually, I beta tested it at home. I did a proof of concept in my garage with my own tools, and then had somebody that I found that could make them for me. And so I had a couple of them made, entered it in a design contest, and ended up, I was runner-up one year for the shelf unit, and then I made a desk unit because somebody said, "Can you make that a desk?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and I did. And so I entered that and ended up winning the design contest for it. And it was kind of gratifying. It was kind of crazy because it was a juried design contest, and it had everybody. It's a local, newspaper or kind of style and fashion and design restaurant newspaper that runs this contest, and they bring in an outside jury of design professionals to pick the winners in all categories. And I mean, they have commercial, office build out where Gensler competes, and they have, everything down to mom and pop like me, but mostly, professionals at the deal. Anyway, when I won that, it was like, okay, that's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Steve, our mutual friend, mentioned that I should talk to you about furniture.
Yeah. Well, he's been on a call with me and seen the unit behind me. I have one in my office, and I think he asked me about it. He said, what's that thing behind you there? And I launched into the story about it. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
What is the goal with that? Is that like just, do you want to like sell them?
See, that's the thing. It's, this goes back to your question, ambition. Well, I don't really have an ambition so much for that. Yeah, it'd be great if I could start making those and people wanted to buy them, and I found a price point that people would do it. It just hasn't been on my, front burner to do that. But to be able to just make it and prove that it works, and then have other people look at it and say, "Oh yeah, that's kind of cool," or whatever, is sort of gratifying to me. So, and I now have 1,000 designs that I could build or that I come up with periodically when I see another piece of furniture somebody else has done. I think, oh, well, how could I make that? Usually out of plywood, because that's kind of my medium for working, but also, I don't know, I like to take sections of trees after we have these storms here that blow down these big trees, and they're cutting them down, get sections of that, and then repurpose that for furniture use too. So someday I might have a wood shop with a CNC machine where I can do some of this stuff, but again, that's not a front burner item right now. So.
It seems like you just like following your curiosity. Is that, would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's funny, as you're talking about just like, the furniture and inventing, I thought of Jeff Bezos. I've listened to, he doesn't do a lot of interviews, but recently he's been doing more. And in one of the interviews, he talked about how he thinks of himself as an inventor, not an entrepreneur, not a startup guy, not a founder, not a businessman, but an inventor.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that with most generational successful, founders, entrepreneurs, whatever it is. They have this trait of wanting to invent and create like net new products or ideas out into the world. So I don't know. I thought when you were talking about that, I was like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, that is. And I would say that may be, it may apply to me too. Not that Jeff and I have anything in common other than that, and that he went to school here in Houston, but in elementary school, I think, at the same school that I matriculated from.
Did he really?
Yeah, that's my understanding. There was a public elementary or public school thing that we started here, and I'm not sure if it wasn't going on other places in the country too, but it was early days, and it was it turned into what they call the magnet school program now, which is mostly thought of as a high school thing, although I think they have magnet schools for lower levels too. But I was one of the early experiments. My school that I went to for elementary school was one of the early experiments in trying to apply that. And basically, you took an aptitude or an IQ test, and if you scored high enough on it, then they said, "Do you want to come try this school?" And the original name for it was ESG, which stood for Elementary School for the Gifted. And we thought that was the worst name. We as students thought that was the worst name. It sounds like we got an extra digit on our hands or some weird appendage or whatever. Or you can read minds or something like that. And so they changed the name of it to the Vanguard program, thank goodness. But still exists to this day as far as I know. But I think Jeff might have been in that school. In
that same school.
Yeah, in elementary school.
Wow.
I've heard that. I haven't confirmed it.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, he's amazing. Please do. He's an amazing guy. What he's done is unbelievable, and I love to learn about people who do some of that stuff too. I listen to a podcast fairly regularly, although a lot of times I like to listen to a podcast that I can fall asleep to. So if it's too stimulating, I can't listen to it. But there's one, it's called Acquired.
Yep.
You ever listen to that one?
Of course, yeah.
So I have a daughter who's in the fashion industry. So the first time I listened to, I think, was the Hermes episode, which is just unbelievable.
What's his name? Why am I blanking on his name? But Bernard?
Bernard is one of the founders. And
that was the most insane episode.
Yeah, and he refused to sell out, and now they're like, just what a genius move it turned out to be. Yeah. And then they just did one recently on Rolex too, which was also pretty fascinating and put a different perspective on that for me. It was like 4 hours long, and I fell asleep and then woke back up and heard the end of it. But it's pretty amazing, and I like those guys too because they really geek out on stuff that I find very interesting.
That's amazing. Yeah, Acquired is great. I think they have a very compared to other podcasts. I think they do one episode a month because they put in so much research and they go so deep.
Right,
and it's like hours long. Many episodes are multiple parts. One of my favorites on Acquired is the founding of Sequoia. Yeah. Which is one of the most prolific venture capital firms.
Yeah, I know.
Did you listen to that one?
I haven't yet, but I know some folks that are associated with it, and I would I've been saving it kind of. Sometimes I save those thinking, okay, well, I'll listen to it when I can actually not fall asleep and pay attention to it. But
it was incredible.
I did listen to part of the chip maker that
NVIDIA, Jensen?
No, the TM. They're the Taiwanese chip maker that the guy started out at Texas Instruments, and I think he was Taiwanese, and he went to Thailand, or not Thailand, Taiwan, and founded TMCST. I don't know what it is, something like that. Anyway, that's a good one to listen to too, because he's very interesting. And then they make chips for everybody. I mean, it's one of those, not the NVIDIA style, but very interesting, background and story on it.
Yeah, I'm about to give you one of the best. I think you'll really love this if you love Acquired. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Yep. It's called, I mentioned it a couple times, it's called Founders by this guy, David Senra. And what's really interesting about the podcast is David is kind of this, I don't think he didn't go to college, didn't really have any prolific background of any sort. But over the last 7-8 years, week after week, he's read a biography a week and recorded a episode on that biography. So if you think about, 8 years times, 52, 400 and whatever episodes and biographies that he's read. Okay. And basically created episodes on each person. So there's multiple on Steve Jobs, there's multiple on Jeff Bezos, multiple on Elon Musk, there's the founder of Hyundai, there's all sorts of people. Right. And I think what's so incredible is he's essentially built a massive web of understanding of the greatest founders of our generation or multiple, past generations, and has been able to map similar characteristics across them, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, that is cool.
Which is really cool.
Like a founder DNA almost or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So he like, when you look at one of the tidbits is, Steve Jobs, he talks about, so if he does an episode on Steve Jobs, he will basically refer to what Steve did in his 20s and then compare it to like 5 other people and how they had similarities and overlaps. And it's just really interesting because it creates this like really nuanced understanding of the person. Definitely. So it's called Founders. I think you'll really like it if you like Acquired.
I will definitely put that in my library.
In your library. Yeah. Do you listen to podcasts more than you read?
Yeah, probably. I got to a point where I wasn't reading. The joke with my wife and I is that, and she said this at one point a few years back, and so I keep bringing it up periodically. But especially when we first got married, she was just a prolific reader, book a week. Mostly fiction, but real stuff, not just fluff. And she'd read all the time. And now she's kind of moved away from that a little bit. But there was some point where I was. I think had to do with my, I read a book called In the Heart of the Sea, which is actually, I need to tell Steve about it. And it is a true account of the whale ship Essex. And they made a movie of it, I think, too, with one of the big actors, but it wasn't as good as the book. The book was incredible, but it was about a whale ship that at its time was known all over the world. It went out and got... this was back when Nantucket was the energy capital of the world. And so these ships would leave there, go fill up with oil and come back. Sometimes they'd be gone for 2-3 years, filling, because they go all the way into the Pacific and get, sperm whales and kill them and render the oil and then come back. And so this one ship went out and it got rammed by a sperm whale and sank. And these guys had to abandon ship, and they some of them ended up surviving. Some of them landed on some of the Pacific islands, and one ship or one lifeboat made it back off the coast of Chile and was found by another whaling ship or something. And they described the guys in there like they weren't even human anymore because they'd been under such stress and literally like cracking bones to eat the marrow out of them and stuff like that, and just complete survival mode. Wow. Anyway, everybody knew this, so Melville knew about it, and that's where he came up with the book Moby Dick. That's what his Moby Dick story is based on, that account. And there's a sperm whale that rams it, and the whole Ahab and his obsession with the white whale and that whole thing. That's based on this account of the whale ship Essex. So I read that book one summer when we were at the beach, And then I thought, you know what? I don't think I ever really read Moby Dick, and everybody says that's the greatest book ever, and or greatest American novel ever. You should read it. So I told my wife, I'm going to read it this year when we go to the beach. So I started reading it, and it is hard. It was hard for me to get through. So it was a paperback. So I finally got to the point where I would just read a chapter. I would tear a chapter off and throw it away so I could have, some progress being made.
It's so big.
Yeah, and I finally got through it. But back to my original start down this path, when I finally finished it, she goes, well, you've only read like 5 books since we've been married. And we've been married like 20 years at that point. And I'm like, okay. And you've read 500, I get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't read as many novels and books recently. I read a lot of trade stuff, and for a while, read magazines back when there were trade magazines and stuff. And I still get a couple of guitar magazines because I geek out on guitars a little bit. But yeah. So I listen to more podcasts than books, I guess, going all the way back to your original question.
Yeah, it's funny. As you were talking, I was thinking about, there was this moment in college where up until college, I've always been super obsessed with growth, personal growth, learning, all of that stuff. It just fuels me. And in college, up until that point, I strongly believed that you could only learn from nonfiction books and podcasts and content. And I was like, what's the point of reading fiction? Like, what, you don't really learn anything. And I was telling a friend this, and he actually completely changed my mind. And I realized that as humans, we learn a lot from stories and inspiration. And sometimes it's ironic, but the less subject matter a conversation, a podcast, a book has, sometimes the more you can learn from it, because we imprint that emotion or that experience. When you read Moby Dick, or you read, I guess this is a nonfiction book, but Lost in the Andes. Have you heard of the story where the rugby team gets? Yeah.
I used to play rugby, so I love that story.
Oh, so you love that story. That was one of the first. It's a true story, but it's a story of these rugby players that are on a plane and crash and get lost in the Andes and survive by having to eat
the dead
and
players,
how 2 of them, I think, walked tens of miles and finally found and got saved and everything like that. And
it also allows you to have a great T-shirt that says "Rugby players eat their own dead."
Is there a T-shirt out there? That's funny.
Yeah,
it's funny.
It's a little sick humor.
Yeah, I imagine the All Blacks wearing that or something like that. When he kind of reframed that, I really started investing more in reading fiction and hearing stories. And part of the reason why I think we're even doing this podcast, right, is you can learn a lot from people's technical expertise and knowledge and what they know about real estate, but you can also learn a lot about people's stories and how they got started and the highs and the lows and kind of everything in between. So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's probably, going back, when you sat around a campfire and you told stories, and that became either mythology to try and explain stuff you didn't know how to explain, or just recounting of, past tales that probably get embellished over time and whatnot. So yeah, pretty interesting.
I want to talk about basketball. I don't know much about basketball, but I know it's a big part of your life. What did you play a lot of basketball growing up?
Yeah. So basketball, tennis were my 2 main sports that I played growing up. I lived across the street from a park, and there were 2 tennis courts and a little half-court basketball court set up. And so for a while, every day after school, I would go over there and play one or the other, depending on what was in vogue that month or whatnot. And so I enjoy it. And I enjoy a good competitive workout, let's say. And I'm not really like a workout class guy. I've done some training with trainers and stuff, which I think is decent, but I'm usually motivated enough that I think I can do my own workout if I'm just going to go to a gym and do it. It's good to get a trainer to help me appreciate the right way to do things and push a little harder sometimes. And I get why people can totally become enamored with that too, because they will make you work harder usually. But for me, the way to work hardest and best is to have a competition where I'm out there trying to, and it's not like I'm, ruthlessly competitive. I don't have to win at all costs, but it's more fun. I sometimes say I'm like a golden retriever. If you'll throw a ball, I'll fetch all day long. But if you want me to just get on a treadmill and walk, or run or whatever, I'll get tired of it and bored with it. So the problem solving, I think, in tennis and basketball are one of the things I like the most. And the reason I enjoy that is it's combined with the physical exertion, which also feels good. So, yeah, I have a lot of fun with those two things. The Rice University thing is pretty cool because I'm also playing with this interesting, diverse group of guys that everything from a Pulitzer Prize winning author who's a history professor there to guys that play on the football team and, the Rice Police Force, and some guys that just have known about the game for a long time and know how to get in and show up and play. But it's a very, very nice, not real chippy type of game too, which can, you can run into places where it gets so competitive or people are so wound up on it that it's just not as much fun. This one's just a lot of fun all around.
Tell us about Rice and your involvement in Rice.
Yeah, I lived across about 3 blocks away from Rice too. That same park where I played basketball and tennis, I was 3 blocks away from Rice University, and so I spent time going over there. I would go over there for summer camps where they had sporting camps. Kick a soccer ball, play tennis, play basketball, and so just I've always felt pretty comfortable on the campus and enjoyed that facility there, and become friends with some of the students, gone over to guest lecture a few times on real estate matters, to architecture, real estate business class. Those are the two that are primarily, people are interested in what I do and some of the stuff, some of the deals I've been involved in.
So there's a deal we talked about that you mentioned was kind of this prolific deal. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Make it quick, and then like I said, I could probably teach a whole class on that one thing, but it's an interesting deal in that it. Our career. I have a business partner that we've done most of my development work with, and so we have done mostly suburban garden style multifamily apartment developments, which is just a type of low density rental development. For those who don't know what a garden style deal is, it's clubhouse and multiple buildings around it, usually surface parked, walk up, no elevators, that sort of thing. Fairly simple. Anyway, we went from doing that to deciding we were ready to do something a little denser and more interesting. And so we wanted to look at least doing a high-rise. So we acquired a site, and then real estate comes back around to location, location, location. And there's a reason why that trite saying gets reinforced so much, and it's because just about anybody could do a lot of what we do in real estate development. I mean, the construction is not rocket science. The rules are there. You follow the rules, you do all this stuff. But if you are good at evaluating locations, then you can create the same product that somebody could 3 or 4 blocks away or 3 or 4 miles away, depending on the type of development and location. But and one will be very successful and the other may not be, and it's because of that locational attribute. And so we found a great location. It was close to a neighborhood where we grew up, close to Rice University, close to the Texas Medical Center, which employs more people than I think the Central Business District of Dallas does. I mean, it's its own employment center, and so and this site is also close to Houston CBD. So we knew it was a great site. So there was an existing apartment project on the site. Around it, a lot of duplexes, fourplexes, stuff like that. And then as you go further out, some very high-end single-family homes. And we acquired the site, we studied it, we looked at some different uses. One of the uses we looked at were townhomes that are denser and in keeping with some of the other development that's gone on immediately surrounding the site. We decided that it was a really good site to do a high-rise development on. And so there are some restrictions on how to develop land in Houston. It's not the Wild West where you can just do anything you want. There's actually a whole code book that is of ordinances that restrict how you develop land, but there's nothing that regulates the height of the development, and even the density is not really regulated. And so we thought, okay, well, this is a good location to do a high-rise development, and we could point to, at that time, several developments in River Oaks, which River Oaks is one of the premier communities, or regarded as one of the premier communities, where, $5 million to $40 million homes are located. River Oaks Country Club there, and it was just an early subdivision that was built outside of downtown that took off and did really well. But there are also some high-rises built internal to that development. So we thought, okay, well, they can do it at River Oaks, we can do it over here. So we started the process, got into it, and then got a lot of neighborhood pushback when we first met to roll it out. Got neighborhood pushback, and then got political pushback. And the mayor at the time stepped in to try and prevent us from going forward with the development. And again, I could get way down the weeds on this, but it involves some very kind of technical aspects of what we were trying to do, and utilizing some ordinances that had not ever been applied the way that they were applied to us at the time. We fortunately at the time had an attorney that we'd engaged because we knew there might be some challenges to this. You read about NIMBY battles all the time, entitlement battles, things like that are common to real estate, not as common in Houston. We ended up with the NIMBY battle of all NIMBY battles in Houston, or the entitlement battle in a city that is commonly known to not have entitlement. So we had an attorney who was a land use guy who went on to become the mayor of Austin for a while, and he represented us, and we had a showdown, I'll call it. We actually ended up suing the city of Houston, but we had kind of a showdown with them orchestrated by our attorney to step through a process that was being very arbitrarily manipulated for political reasons. And we ended up getting through that process and then settling with the city of Houston and getting a building permit. And then the group in the neighborhood had a lot of law partners in a lot of the big firms there, and they had been preparing something, and they've used they filed what's called a nuisance lawsuit, which is a form of law that is sort of outside the bounds of what the city regulates, and it goes back to the torts thing, which I know more about law and traffic and things like that than I ever thought I would know as a result of being involved in this. But we ended up in a lawsuit with the neighborhood over it, and that lasted for a month in November 2013, I want to say. And I spent 7 hours on the witness stand in this trial. And by the way, a trial is just a play that's put on by two producer directors that are called attorneys, and the actors are called expert witnesses and or plaintiffs and defendants, and the audience is the judge and the jury. And I mean, and then that you have, the set crew that puts on the big, displays. Now they're all on screen or whatever. But anyway, it really pretty phenomenal to be, in the middle of that and watch what happens with one of these trials. And so we went through the trial. The judge kind of let a verdict go through that was, it didn't sink the deal, but it would have put more of a financial burden on it. It was basically an entitlement cost, and we would have been able to pay it and go on. And the other side knew that, sort of, so we appealed and completely got it overturned on appeal, and the appellate ruling is pretty amazing to read if you like reading stuff like that. So if you're a real estate developer, an architect, or an attorney, this whole case is kind of interesting. And it was overturned, and then that was it. And so we were free to go. But in the meantime, the economy had slowed down, so we put it on hold for a little while. Just recently resuscitated it. That building, which we never called it this, but if you Google Ashby High-rise, you can learn all you want to learn about it. That was what the neighborhood branded the development as. It's now called the Langley, and it just topped out. And in fact, over the weekend, they put a big portable crane up to take the big main tower crane down from the building. And so it's probably 6 months away from being completely dried in and finished, except for the interior, and then it's being finished out on the inside. Will be operational before the end of the year. So pretty crazy story. Yeah. I've gone over to Rice and tie it back to Rice. I've been invited over to guest lecture primarily as a result of that. I don't think people would have known who Kevin Kirton and my entity, Buckhead Investment Partners, was necessarily, except that we made a lot of news for a while because of that development. And it was pretty eye-opening. I mean, I had personal things happen that were towards me and my kids and family that were pretty insane. I don't think anybody threatened to kill us, but they sent us nasty letters and Christmas cards and things like that. And so it was definitely an eye-opening experience, and something that sort of educated me about some of human nature, really. So been very interesting. And I think I will teach a class on it someday. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. That's crazy. I want to end with one question. When you think about all the things you've done in your life, and all the different roles you've played, what are you most proud of?
My wife and my kids, hands down. And we didn't talk about that today just because I don't know, it was drilled down on me in my real estate career, I guess. But definitely that's the best accomplishment that I can point to. Got 3 good kids who are making their way in the world, and a wife who has stood by me. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
You bet.
Thank you for sharing all sorts of stuff, from your career to your personal life to, I think Steve was spot on. This was really easy for me. Hopefully it didn't feel like I put you on the hot spot.
No, not at all. I mean, you asked for it, so you got what you asked for. You wind me up and get me going, I'll talk. But I'm sure Steve maybe said that too. But I enjoyed it and enjoyed some of your insight. And like I said, it was probably therapeutic for me to go through some of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.